Well, as you've no doubt heard by now, what we have been warning about for a long time has finally happened. Iran has launched missiles at Israel. And as we've had when Ted Postal was on our show from the MIT professor several times over the last few months, we warned then that if Iran decided to strike Israel without giving all the advance warning as they did last April, that the missiles would go through the Iron Dome system. And that's exactly what has happened. Gary's going to have some great B-roll to show you here shortly. But listen, we're going to do something a little unusual here. There's a Pentagon briefing that's scheduled for 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, about 13 minutes from now. We were just going to watch and see what happens because one of my real concerns is that they're going to announce additional force deployments to the area. It's potentially causing, the U.S. to get even closer to getting drawn into a war. Rather than waiting until we heard from the Pentagon, we thought it would be instructive to actually have to broadcast that live so you can hear it live with us, and we'll be right on as soon as they're finished to make commentary. Might even do some while they're actually speaking if that's useful. But you're going to get the news as it's breaking. It'll be live broadcast right here. But until that starts here, I want to cover a few things, what we do know so far. Now, this is a very, very dynamic situation. A lot of unconfirmed reports have been coming in, a lot of contradictory information. But what we do know so far is that reportedly up to 400 missiles have been fired from Iran. And again, as we warned previously, in the April attack where there was 350 drones and missiles that were fired, and many of those were the older kind, and a lot of them fell apart before they even hit the target. This time, they appeared to be a majority of the modern ones. And what you're seeing right there, by the way, that's the launch of the missiles from Iran. That's when the missiles are going up. That's not the Iron Dome system. That's some of the launches that was going on. The time of flight, from what we've been told so far, of some of these hypersonic missiles has been 10 minutes. So Israel got multiple hours advance notice last time. They had barely 10 minutes this time. And as we mentioned in our show earlier today, the U.S. had announced that they had indications that Iran was preparing to fire ballistic missiles, and now we know that's exactly what happened. And as you can see from these scenes here, these is just some spectacular, unbelievable kinds of situation here. These are all missiles that got through the system, the Iron Dome, the Arrow, all the other kind of air defense systems that Israel had. And we don't yet know what the impact of these was. We don't know what they struck, how many people may have been killed or wounded. We just don't know so far. There's kind of an information blackout. One of the things that Israel wants to do is control the communications environment so that only information that they want gets out. But look, that's not going to last very long in a free and democratic society. People are going to be broadcasting this stuff and sending cell phone videos. I think we have a few more of those we can show later on. But this is a major, major change. We had, and I'm going to actually, no, let me not talk about it. Let me just show it to you. We saw Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of days ago made a very, very brash statement to the people of Iran. And I pointed out at the time that it seemed a little odd that as he's getting ready to go into southern Lebanon, that he's making a comment to the people of Iran, but he made some real bold statements. Watch this.
Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Dev. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. But you know one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different.
Now, just think about what he's saying there. He has been so cocky and so bold and telling the people of Iran that the end of the Iranian regime is coming. Now, this is coming on the heels of when he has just assassinated the political leader of Hezbollah. This is when he had previously assassinated the political leader, the negotiating guy from Hamas in Tehran. So you better believe that the Iranian leaders were listening to that, and you can see from their perspective, there is no value in withholding their weapons like Nasrallah did. He withheld his weapons thinking that they would serve as a deterrent from Israel. They didn't, and he's dead. So now Israel is not going to follow that same thing. And especially with that statement there that the end is coming sooner than you think. What does anybody think they're going to do? And you saw him very cockily comment there that, what about these couple of names, Nasrallah, et cetera. Those were mentioned by Iran in their response to why they did this. They say this is a response against Israel for the assassination of Nasrallah, for Hania in Tehran, and I think a couple of others. Not that one that was mentioned there. I believe it was a different one. And of course, probably still going back to their embassy compound that was destroyed by Israel earlier. See, this long history of things, and then also the incursion into the southern Lebanon there against their proxy Hezbollah. Now, you can't make those kinds of accusations and claims and think that nobody's ever going to do anything. And listen, Iran does not want war. They have signaled with this strike, just like they did with the one back in April, that they don't want a continuation and an expansion of the war. You can listen to that carefully. Iran still does not want an escalation of the war. So, depending on what report you want to believe, somewhere between 200 and 400 rockets have been fired. You saw that video we were showing a second ago. A substantial number of them got through. We don't know how serious it is yet, but what they said in the aftermath was, this is a done deal. This is our response for what you have done up to this point. And they came with a warning. And if you don't stop now, if you retaliate further, then there will be even more. And listen, even if that higher number was true, if it was 400, that represents a relatively small percentage of what Iran has. They can launch thousands of these things if they wanted to. And you saw that the Iron Dome didn't stop those. And it's going to be real interesting to see, and we probably won't know until tomorrow sometime, what targets were selected. What did Iran target? Because was it some of their big military bases? Was it any of their infrastructure, et cetera? Because it could get a lot worse. So we'll see what happened from that. Now, what do you think the chances are that Netanyahu is going to say, dang it, okay, all right, well, that's fair. I mean, we knocked out all these people, we assassinated these, so sure enough, we'll stop here. I mean, there's no chance of it. And in fact, the spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, even before all the missiles had stopped falling, had already announced there will be consequences for this, was the phrase that was used. And that can't surprise anyone, because as I've been telling you for a long time, Netanyahu wanted this. This is what he wanted. He wanted to spawn a response from Iran so that he could then, I feel very confident, launch a direct attack against Iran proper. Not against any of their proxies, but against Iran. And you already know, because we showed you earlier today, you got Jack Keane has been screaming for this. Lindsey Graham apparently is already back out there talking again about, yep, it's time to go after Iran. I've been telling you all this for all this time. All these people are going to be acting like this is coming out of nowhere. They're going to say, see, I told you Iran was going to be doing this stuff, oblivious to the fact, or else just willfully ignoring the fact that these are all responses to what Iran has done, that Iran has shown great self-constraint here, in fact, over amount of time. The fact, just to give you a sense of comparison, can you imagine if the United States of America or London, Great Britain, had one of their embassies somewhere destroyed by an adversary, destroyed, so that the people inside were assassinated and killed, and we wouldn't have just gone crazy? Or that during a presidential inauguration in Washington, D.C., or maybe with the prime minister and his inauguration in London, and someone assassinates with a missile one of the invited guests because they were an enemy of someone else, and we would not have just gone crazy about that. Or that our embassy personnel had been harmed and wounded in a pager explosion sent out by a foreign intelligence service, and we would not have gone crazy about that. We would have retaliated after every single one of those major kinds of things. Iran did none of those things until today. They withheld from all of them, even these big ones, until now, because you just can't push somebody any further and think they're going to do nothing. But again, that implies that Netanyahu didn't want Iran to do anything. And of course he did. I mean, it's self-evident, and we're being dishonest with ourselves if we say he didn't want a response. Because you can see when you look at all the things that he's been doing ever since October 7th, has been he wants to destroy Hamas, and by that he means solve the Palestinian problem once and for all. He wants to destroy Hezbollah. These are words that he or some of his senior lieutenants have been using in Lebanon. And his big prize is he's wanted to knock out Iran. So he wants to, in one fell swoop, in a big motion here, he wants to destroy everything. And he's been counting on the United States to help him out. We did help him out physically in April of this year. And now then we have a note, actually a comment here from Lloyd Austin, which I think was delivered last night. Gary, if you could throw that one up there, I'll read off the screen here because it's kind of small. This is a statement that was made by Austin before this strike happened. In which let's see if there's that. No, I'm talking about
Danny. Oh yeah, no, I know, Danny. Before we get to that, and we'll go right to that. Wanted to give everyone a heads up that the Pentagon has pushed off their briefing for not until 3:00. So we got some time here to flesh some things out. So we'll still get to it live at 3. We thought it was going to be 2:30. They moved it. We didn't move it. So we'll take it live at 3:00. So we got plenty of time. You can delve into some stuff. Maybe get into the Hargari statements that he made previously.
Yeah, let's do that, Gary. If you could also have the other Netanyahu's one from the United Nations speech, that's also useful.
Sure, got that.
We'll talk about some of that. But first of all, let's go ahead and show the Austin one. This is from last night.
I'll get right to that.
Okay. So he said, we agreed on the necessity of dismantling attack infrastructure along the border. That's talking about the Hezbollah fight there to ensure that Lebanon cannot conduct another October-style 7th attack. The diplomatic resolution is required to ensure that civilians can return safely to their homes on both sides of the border. We discussed the serious consequences for Iran in the event Iran chooses to launch a direct military attack against Israel. That's the Secretary of Defense probably about 12 hours before this event actually took place. Well, now it's taken place. And so the big question is going to be what's next. That's why we're waiting to see what the Pentagon is going to say, because as Gary had something up on there a second ago, you had already before this, several thousand more American troops were being sent to the region already. And that included a lot of additional air power. There was some F-15 Strike Eagles, F-16 fighter jets, and F-22 fighter jet squadrons. So it's a substantial amount of air power heading to the region there. And of course, I think that there's only one possible target for that, or one possible use for that, and that is against Iran. And we're not going to use any of that firepower against Hezbollah, because that's what Iran that's what Israel is supposed to be able to handle with their military. And I want to talk about that aspect for a minute, because this is really important. I know there's so many. We showed that clip from an article from Eli Lake earlier. And Gary, if you can be pulling that clip up, we use the one with Jack Keane while I'm talking here. But Eli Lake, who's a former administration official, came out and said something I found reprehensible, quite frankly, where he's basically saying, hey, you know what? Let's take advantage of this opportunity and take care of Iran once and for all. I mean, it almost sounded like it was coming from Netanyahu himself. But that is both illegal and immoral. Let's call it for what it is. Gary, give me a thumbs up when you have that clip ready, the one from Keene earlier. Because look, we have the U.S. Constitution, and we have the 1973 War Powers Act, which says, that's the article that he's talking about right there. The virtue of escalation. Look, people like this, they anger me and infuriate me because, number one, they have no bloody idea what war is all about. My first combat engagement was in Desert Storm in 1991 in Iraq. And I saw firsthand, not just the actual combat and the men killed in action as a result of our actions here, but I also saw the consequence on the civil population. And it was just horrific, the stuff that had happened. And it just, I was far more upset about the consequence I saw in the civil population of Iraq than on the troops of Iraq. Because, I mean, that was a fair fight, relatively speaking. But, I mean, they were armed. We were armed. We went into an engagement, and our side came out successful. But the people are the ones that really suffered. And for people like Eli Lake here to talk about and has the audacity to use the term, the virtue of escalation, meaning killing people in escalating war, not because Iran is threatening us. Iran isn't threatening us. They're threatening other people. And they're not even threatening. They're having an engagement against Israel as a result of what Israel's been doing to them and to their proxies and to their supporters in the region here. But what Lake is talking about is let's just go after Israel or Iran because we don't like them, because our friend in the area doesn't like them. So he's actually saying that we should escalate. Do you have that video ready to go, Gary?
Eli Lake says this in the Free Press, that there are now strategic opportunities to go after Iran's nuclear program. If Harris and Biden were wise, they would shelve their strategy of endless ceasefire talks and instead embrace Israel's escalation, because the best way to end a regional war is to win it.
Where the Biden administration is, I think, they just want it to stop. That is simply where they are. And I think that is quite appalling, because they should be on Israel's side to crush Hezbollah, to crush Hamas, to crush the Houthis, and do that with our assistance as much as possible, to set Iran back for years to come and remove them as the dominant aggressive force in the region.
Who is the dominant aggressive force in the region? Who is actually talking about going to war with somebody that's not threatening them? At least you can say between Israel and Iran that various times, and regardless of who started what, I mean, they're focused on each other, and both of them have some justification in saying, well, they started it, or their fault here because they're against us. I mean, they both stated that they are against each other, but not us. And yet you see Jack Keane and I understand Lindsey Graham moments ago, and Eli Lake there. They're actually saying, let's just use our power and go kill a bunch of Iranians. Let's just do it, just to be done with it once and for all. That is a grotesque misuse of the United States Armed Forces. And by the way, you talk about lives. He's not concerned about the Iranian life. They're also not concerned about the American life, because they are damn well loose and free with sending the U.S. military into a combat zone where Americans could get killed, whether that's pilots getting shot down, whether that's so many of our troops in the region are extremely vulnerable. And I want to reinforce that. Gary, if you can throw up that map of the deployments we have in the area, just take a look at this here. This is where there's roughly 57,000, and now it's over, but it's probably closer to 60,000. But you see, they're all over the place. And let me just tell you, since I was deployed there several times during my career, or a couple of times specifically in Iraq, is that a lot of these smaller bases, and that's what a lot of these are, is we just have guys spread out in some of the smaller bases and a handful of bigger ones in the area. They have some air defense capacity for like mortars or from small scale rockets. And I'm talking like, they'll call them Katyusha rockets. They're relatively small, but they don't have defenses against ballistic missiles, against hypersonic missiles. If the Iranians fire a missile, they'll find the target. They'll get hit. We can even shoot down some of the drones, although some of them have actually gotten through. We've lost some of our troops because of that in Jordan already. And you are just casually not worried about this, because Gary, throw up now the one about the Iranian missile ranges. If we get into a war with Iran, if the Pentagon comes out here and says we're sending more troops into the region and we're going to consider, give the president options to go to war against Iran for what's happened here. Look at those missile ranges here. These are some of the bigger ones. You see virtually everything in those circles there is covered by the force deployment that I showed you a minute ago. Every one of our troops would be at real risk because we don't have any defense against them. Now, I've been arguing for years that we need to get our troops out of there. I keep saying over and over, they serve nothing but a point of strategic vulnerability, and this is it. This is one of the biggest points of vulnerability they had. Already some troops had died because we didn't pull them out there earlier on just some of the smaller scale drone strikes, etc. But now then you're on the verge of potentially a major regional escalation into all-out war. And now then those troops, if we get into a war, are just sitting ducks for the Iranian side. Now, Iran doesn't want to. Iran doesn't want to attack these folks because they don't want a war. That's, again, I'll reiterate, the way that they did this attack and the things that they said afterwards, they said, we're done. We aren't going to escalate further unless you retaliate. But since Netanyahu has wanted this and he wanted to spawn it, then it's up to America. So the question is going to be, and why I'm so interested in seeing what the Pentagon has to say here. I mean, I hope that the Pentagon just says something like, we're monitoring the situation. We're carefully working with all the regional actors, whatever, just a bunch of nonsense, just a bunch of words, as opposed to saying, yes, we're going to send 10,000 troops into the area, or we're going to send the Marines to bolster up or whatever. I pray to God we don't get that, because if that's what comes out of this, then folks, we're in real trouble then, because if you put that much combat power, a lot of combat power in the rest, especially if you think about putting any ground forces, then that indicates that there is some very foolish decision makers who are thinking in some bad directions. Because if you send that many folks in there, then you're going to tell Iran, you're going to signal Iran, okay, your chance to strike is now. All those targets I just showed you, I assure you, they have what's called 10-digit grid coordinates for all of those places right there already. They have them targeted. I would just almost wager my whole year's salary on that. They know where we are. And they know that the longer that they waited, if there's time for deployments to take place, then they'll become more and more vulnerable. The Iranians will be, and our troops will get more and more protection. So they will be tempted to think, should we strike now while they're at their most vulnerable and we can do something, or should we wait and let America build up its forces when we can do a lot less and they can do a lot more harm to us? You see where the temptation would be there. So we should not put ourselves in that position. What President Biden ought to do is be reading the riot act behind the scenes to Netanyahu and saying, look, this is a bunch of crap, what you've been doing. We've allowed you to walk us into a corner here and haven't done anything and have tried to, just be your buddy and trying to support you. But this is where the end of the road is. Now, I don't have...
Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plan?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now.
Yeah, we should have a ceasefire now. Does that give you a lot of confidence that he says, well, I'm really uncomfortable? You're the president of the United States of America. Where's that big cocky guy that we saw in, I think, last April, where he says, we shape events, we make things happen, we don't let it happen? That's where the indispensable nation. Where's that cockiness? That's what the Joe Biden we need to see right now. We need to see him get on the phone with Netanyahu or get on a Zoom call, whatever they have, it's classified, and tell him this is it. You take one more action on Iran and you are on your own. No more interceptor missiles from us. No more long-range missiles. No more bunker busters. No more artillery shells. Figure it out for yourself. But if we will not fight a war for you, he should point blank, flat out tell him, we will not fight a war for you.
We don't walk away from our allies. We stand with them. We don't let tyrants win. We oppose them. We don't merely watch global events unfold. We shape them. That's what it means to be the indispensable nation. That's what it means to be the world's superpower and the world's leading democracy.
Okay, I'm agreeing with you there. That is what it takes to be the indispensable nation. There's only one nation right now that can keep this region from blowing up, and it ain't Israel. It's not even Iran. It's America. We can either allow ourselves to be swept away by the motion of events and let Benjamin Netanyahu continue to call the shots, or we can stand up finally and call the shots. That's what should happen. If that does happen, then we can avoid this war. There won't be any Americans killed in action. There won't be any more Iranians or Lebanese people killed in action. Well, let me back up there. The Lebanese, that's a separate issue. That Israel's got troops on the ground. That's going. But this won't escalate beyond that, and no Americans will be killed. But if he continues to do what he has been doing, and letting events take themselves and him just roll up with it and stand there in front of everybody and say, well, I'm really uncomfortable. I hope it doesn't happen. What you unequivocally signaled to Benjamin Netanyahu, two things. First of all, to Benjamin Netanyahu, you signal you're still in control. You can literally do anything you want. and we'll just be carried away by whatever you say. It will make a bunch of statements, but we won't change it. And you'll signal to Iran, don't count on any restraint from the United States. And in fact, if we talk about here and coming up now about 20 minutes, 18 minutes, if the Pentagon comes on there and says we're sending more combat power, then you have signaled to Iran the likelihood that they're going to go to war with the United States, and they'll take whatever action they're going to take. They've already seen that delay just gets the leaders killed, as happened to Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah. So it seems that we're putting them in an awfully difficult position to, quote, use it or lose it. And that means take the advantage of the targeting of American troops while you have the chance, while our vulnerability is at its highest. So that's what is coming down from that. Now, let's talk about realities for a minute. We are now, what is it? I think 5 weeks away from the presidential election. So what does any rational person, any political animal think that Joe Biden's going to do heading that close to the election, knowing for sure that so far Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been, beating each other up trying to say who's the most pro-Israel. So for sure that if Biden reads the riot act to Israel and doesn't go to war for them, that you can count on the Republicans and Trump to say how weak they are. And you guys, you handed a victory to Iran. I mean, any number of things. I mean, they'll be shaming them into action. And of course, that'll resonate with a lot of the voters. And they'll think, wow, yeah, you really did, because they've got control of so many of the networks, and that message will go out all over the place. And so that's going to make Biden go, yeah, about that. I'd rather win the election for Kamala Harris on my side. So we want to keep our policies going. So almost certainly you're going to hear her say, yeah, we have to go to our friend Israel. I mean, that's all she's ever said so far. Going back to the presidential debate, her interviews since that time, she keeps repeating that theme over and over. We'll do whatever it takes for them. But then there's the issue of the legality. So I know, at least in the past and still on paper, America is a country governed by the rule of law. So if there was a law, say, for example, the 1973 War Powers Act or the Constitution itself, and it said that the only entity, the only power authorized in America to take our country to war is not the executive branch, it's the legislative branch. Only Congress can authorize war. And the Constitution specifically prohibits the president, the commander-in-chief, from taking the country to war. The 1973 War Powers Act is even more specific in that it says that, and in fact, it was written because of some abuses by the administrative branch prior to that, that unless the U.S. is attacked or our forces are attacked or are imminent attack or a threat of attack, only then can he unilaterally use the armed forces to respond, and then he has to still come back and get congressional authorization to go beyond 60 days. Many people always think that there's this 60-day get-out-of-jail-free card that they can do whatever they want and then come to Congress, and that's not true. That is a complete lie. That people misinterpret that because they want to misinterpret it, by the way, just pointing that out. The actual law says you can't. It says that any other purpose must first have congressional authorization. Now, that's supposed to be a declaration of war, by the way, the Constitution, but there's, you can have an AUMF, authorization for the use of military forces. It's kind of a cop-out, but at least it is a congressional authorization. I know that probably I've seen a lot of headlines already. Everybody's all up in arms about what happened to Israel, and everybody's ready to, heap doom and gloom on top of Iran. But what should be happening in the Congress is not just calls for military action. It should be calls for debate. This is where we need to be saying, okay, let's slow things down here. It's time for us to debate. Do we want to go to war? Are we willing to spend more of our treasure and sacrifice some of our sons and daughters for a war that should never happen, for a war of fighting when we're not even involved? And thanks for finding that, Gary. I had heard that he said, I hadn't seen his exact quote there, where Lindsey Graham is saying that there needs to be an overwhelming response. I assure you that Lindsey Graham was the happiest person in America when he saw that those missiles were falling. He could care less about any Israelis who may have been killed in the process. He is just gleeful And I can assure you, he'll be on every network that'll give him a mic about saying that same thing, that we need to fight more. So instead of the member of the United States Senate saying, let's follow the Constitution and the U.S. law, and let's have a debate, even a quick one, and let's talk about this, give the people a chance to weigh in. He's not going to do that. He's wanting to push us quickly into even more war, into irrevocable war. And there's going to be a lot of people that are willing to do that. And I am unequivocally opposed to that. So I am categorically against everything he stands for, and anyone who's going to be pushing this same button, whether it's him, Eli Lake, Jack Keane, John Bolton. I'm sure he'll be just as adamant about this as Lindsey Graham has been, because he's been lusting for a war for so many years against Iran, oblivious to the fact that all this stuff is because of aggression done by Israel against Iran. That's the bottom line. Yeah, I don't care what anybody would like to be true. That's what is true. Objectively, that is true. As I just told you, no American government that has ever existed or will ever exist would allow our embassy to be destroyed, would allow one of our leaders to be assassinated, or especially if someone would be assassinated in our capital city during an inauguration, and not just absolutely have an overwhelming response. We would. So to suggest that Iran shouldn't, and that there's something wrong with him for now responding, is of course irrational. No one accused Lindsey Graham of being rational, or John Bolton of being rational. So there's that. But then there's also an even bigger issue. Well, maybe not a bigger issue, just as big, I say. And that is our capacity to wage war. If this was the only thing on the plate, we could handle it. We could definitely send a bunch of firepower over there, a bunch of ships and missile carriers, and a bunch of ground forces. Even if we could probably do some real damage to Iran. But it's not the only thing that exists out there. There is also the potential for us to get drawn into a war in the Russia-Ukraine war in the Middle East. Of course, there's the ever-present possibility that so many talk about in the Indo-Pacific between China and Taiwan. And if we get drawn into this war, let me just remind you of a few things here recently. It's a couple, 2 or 3 weeks back in Kiev, when people are talking, when there was some discussion about whether we should give long-range missiles to Zelensky to be able to use against Russia, there was some question about, why are you slow rolling it? Why are you holding back all these ammunition and weapons from Ukraine? And Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, came out and told us, well, it's not that we're slow rolling it. It's not that we're holding it back for no good reason. We're actually don't have them. We actually have a real problem with interceptor missiles. Is that something live right now, Gary?
The White House Situation Room, joined in person and remotely by their national security team. We are still working with the IDF and the authorities in Israel to assess the impact of the attack. But at this time, and I stress at this time, we do not know of any deaths in Israel. We are tracking the reported death of a Palestinian civilian in Jericho in the West Bank. We do not know of any damage to aircraft or strategic military assets in Israel. In short, based on what we know at this point, this attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. This was first and foremost the result of the professionalism of the IDF, but in no small part because of the skilled work of the U.S. military and meticulous joint planning in anticipation of the attack. We're also aware of reports of a terrorist attack in Jaffa that took the lives of a number of Israeli civilians and wounded several others today. Our condolences go out to the families of the victims and to the family of the Palestinian civilian in Jericho. Obviously, my update here is based on early reports, and we reserve the right to amend and adjust as necessary as we gather more information. The word fog of war was invented for a situation like this. This is a fluid situation. We will consult with the Israelis on next steps in terms of the response and how to deal with what Iran has just done, and we will continue to monitor for further threats and attacks from Iran and its proxies. We are particularly focused on protecting U.S. service members in the region. And with that, I'll take just a few questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Is the administration making any preparations to evacuate U.S. citizens from
Gary, go ahead and leave that on. Let's go ahead and see what those questions are.
We've had some initial discussions with the Israelis in the aftermath of this at the military level and also at the White House to Prime Minister's office level. We'll continue those conversations in the hours ahead. I'm not going to prejudge or get ahead of anything. We want to have some deep consultations with the Israelis, and I'll have more to report to you after we get the opportunity for deeper discussions.
And escalation in the region?
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event. And it is equally significant that we were able to step up with Israel and create a situation in which no one was killed in this attack in Israel, so far as we know at this time. We are now going to look at what the appropriate next steps are to secure, first and foremost, American interests, and then to promote stability to the maximum extent possible as we go forward. Yeah.
Back in April, the president's message to Israel was to take the win when the U.S. and Israel were able to intercept the barrage of Iranian missiles. Is he recommending a similarly limited response this time?
I will not, from this podium, share the president's recommendations. He will have the opportunity to share them directly. We're going to have, as I said, ongoing consultations with the Israelis this afternoon, this evening. It is too early for me to tell you anything publicly in terms of our assessment or in terms of what our expectations are of the Israelis or the advice that we will give them.
So will he be speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu today?
I don't have anything to announce from this podium, but I can tell you that he is tracking this minute by minute. We are very much deeply in touch with the Israelis, and insofar as we have calls to read out, we'll make sure to read them out with you. Just last question, then I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Jake. In April, after Iran struck Israel, the U.S. issued a number of sanctions as a consequence. This morning, the president said there will be severe consequences if Iran carried out this attack. What are those consequences, and are they more severe than sanctions?
Totally legitimate question, and that answer will come based on the conversations and consultations we have with our Israeli counterparts. It's too soon for me to stand before you today and give you an answer. What I can tell you is this. We are proud of the actions that we've taken alongside Israel to protect and defend Israel. We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make that the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Jake.
Okay.
And Danny,
right,
now it looks like the Pentagon has actually moved up their briefing. They're starting in just a minute here.
Okay. As soon as it does pop it up there, I want to key on that one. The last thing he said there, that there will be severe consequences. So it doesn't look like we're out of the woods here yet. I can't reiterate enough. Iran has a lot more striking power that they can use. And if we're seeking to de-escalate the situation and bring it under stability, which Jake Sullivan just said there on the one hand, and then on the very next sentence talked about how there will be severe consequences. Okay, we're getting back that whole deal. Before that happens, we must bring this to the Congress, ergo, so the American people get a chance to weigh in. That's what's important. We need a chance to have our own voice heard in this. Look, the reason why we give Israel $3.5 or $3.8 billion every year is so they can defend themselves, so they can have a military that can handle their own national security. There's a reason for that. We don't give them that money so then they can take the U.S. armed forces on top of that. If there's to be any retaliation, which I don't recommend, but if there is, it's going to be Israel, and they should be doing it on their own. We should not help. Now, I am also interested in, because he keeps talking about the participation of the United States. So I want to know what he's talking about was done there. What have we done so far, other than just giving some intelligence, perhaps? Because he acted like there was something more. It's a question I would be wanting to ask. The other thing is he said that the whole attack was defeated and ineffective. And he said, the Iron Dome was successful and all this. Folks, you saw with your own eyes, the imagery that Gary has shown several times there. There was a lot of strikes getting through there. I don't know what they hit, so we'll have to wait till the sun comes up to be able to figure that out. But come on, I mean, you can't tell us we didn't see what we saw, that those missiles all landed on something. Now, that's going to be important too, what was targeted, because it could be that Iran fired missiles not at any of the critical infrastructure so that they could avoid an escalation. Because that's what they said. They said that this is a response for the specific assassinations, for the killing of Nasrallah, for the assassination in Tehran, etc. So all those things. So they're saying that this was our response to that, and that we're okay with it being over here. But if it continues on, they're going to continue on too. And then the next time they may strike critical infrastructure. And let me remind you that I think it was 2019 that there was a pinpoint strike by Iran into several oil storage tanks in Saudi Arabia as part of the war that was going on with the Houthis at that time. And there were some pinpoint strikes on a refinery that were, I mean, literally, there was 6 targets that were hit, and they were nearly identical in where each of the things were struck because they have that capability. Iran showed that they can hit something that's really, really important if they want to. And yeah, Gary's showing you these things there. I mean, you see with your own eyes, that's not Iron Dome intercepting anything. That is a whole barrage of missiles striking the ground. So they're hitting something. Now, I don't know that maybe they were just out in the middle of nowhere, but then again, that will imply that Iran fired them out in the middle of nowhere so that they would not escalate the war here. But depending on what the Pentagon's about to say here, this is probably going to end up being just round one. I don't see any. I mean, you heard one of the questions for Sullivan there before it cut away was back in April. President Biden publicly said, "Look, just take the win, Israel. Okay, take the win." That was the response. Let's let that be it. But because Netanyahu doesn't want that to be the end, he wants Iran to be ended. As you heard in that clip that I played you from his statement just yesterday, warning the Iranian people that, something is coming and sooner than you think. He said in a separate part of that statement there. In his UN speech, he went even further and just was demonizing, Iran. And again, just implied that they were going to go after Iran because that is his objective. He wants a military solution for everything in the region, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, and it's not going to be there. He is not going to succeed. I started telling you before we cut away to that we don't have the capacity to fight a sustained war. If we get into an ongoing war with Iran, then we don't have enough missiles and interceptor missiles to fight a sustained war. At the same time, we're helping Iran or Israel fight in Lebanon because that's not going anywhere. That's not going to stop anytime soon. And by the way, apparently none of those rockets have been launched. So they still have, who knows how many are still left. I know a lot of them have been taken out, but they could have scores of thousands of those. They still are still socked away in the sides of mountains somewhere to some degree. And then, of course, you have Ukraine.
World.
All right, so we got this. All right, we'll cut away and go to it.
Initial reports suggest that Israel, with the active support of the United States and other partners, effectively defeated this attack. We have demonstrated once again our commitment to Israel's defense. We'll remain in very close touch with Israel and other partners in the region in the hours and days ahead.
So that was Secretary Blinken just moments ago, John.
Yeah, so here's the thing.
Okay, I know that was pretty short one there. But listen, why do we need to demonstrate our commitment to the defense of Israel? Now, listen, I know that's not a popular question in many quarters to ask, but I'm asking.
So before April, it was always Iran would attack Israel through.
There we go. Sorry about that. Not sure what that was. Why do we need to demonstrate anything? We're supposed to be the 500-pound gorilla. We're supposed to be the one that, as we saw from Biden earlier this year, we shape events. We're not shaping anything. Do you not see this? I mean, even if you're just a passionate, ardent supporter of Israel, no matter what, you've got to see that we're not leading anything. There's no Article 5 issue with our security arrangements with Israel. Again, as I started saying a minute ago, we give $3.8 billion every year so they can defend themselves. Did we fight for Israel in 1967, in 1973, in the 2006 second Lebanon war with Israel? No, we didn't fight in any of those. Why is there this expectation that we now need to prove our commitment to the defense of Israel? That's done every year with the money. And we just gave them another $8.7 billion just last week. So it's time to start getting things in the right order here. And we're not the ones that are supposed to be just doing whatever Israel tells us to do. We're supposed to be the ones that are shaping events. I agree with Biden. That's what we should be doing, but that's not what we are doing. We are being shaped by events. And now then you see, first it was Jake Sullivan and now Secretary of State Blinken basically continuing to be subservient to Israel, saying that we're going to, coordinate with them. There's going to be some kind of retaliation, and we're more defense, supporting the defense of Israel, et cetera. I mean, who knows what Secretary Austin's going to say? I can't imagine it'll be any different. It'd probably be the same kind of thing. We'll see what comes out. I'm not sure who's going to give that briefing, but it would seem to be the Secretary of Defense. But folks, I mean, at some point, doesn't our security have to matter? Let me drive this home to the point to where you can understand. We are putting our national security at risk by this blind adherence to whatever Israel says, even though by their very actions, they are spawning all of this. By assassinating Nasrallah and then now going in with a ground invasion after killing and wounding all their top leaders, that has just been exploded now because Israel chose to go in there. And if anyone is tempted to say, yeah, but that's only because since the 8th of October, Hezbollah has been firing rockets into Israel, and enough is enough, to quote one of their leaders saying recently. Why was Hezbollah firing rockets in there? What did they say? Was it because they don't like Iran or Israel? Because they want to attack Tel Aviv? They said explicitly and repeatedly that was in defense of the Palestinian people who were being attacked by Israel. The Houthis were attacking the shipping, then have attempted to attack even Israel a few times because of their war in the Gaza Strip. So if Israel at any time wanted to get rid of those rockets, they could easily have said, we're going to have a ceasefire, which America was pleading for them to do. And they ignored us because they don't want a ceasefire. They don't want peace. They don't want this problem to, quote, continue on forever. They want to try and get this solved militarily. So in the process of them going after something that's militarily unachievable, because they just don't have enough capacity to, you would literally have to kill millions of people. You would have to kill nearly all the Palestinians or somehow physically drive them out of the territory, just completely out, whether Egypt or Jordan wanted them or not, to just physically expel them or kill anyone who's left. And then you would have to just wipe out hundreds of thousands of people in southern Lebanon and just turn it into a no man's land, which some Israeli leaders have said it should be an opportunity or should be one of their objectives. And then you would just, I say then you would have to kill everybody in Iran, but you can't do that unless, of course, they escalate to nuclear weapons, meaning they being Israel. That's the only way you get rid of that. And I don't think that anyone in the world, even Americans, are going to stand for that level of just slaughter. Even as much as things are out of whack right now, I don't think we'll go that far. So it's militarily unattainable at any kind of reasonable cost. And even at those exorbitant costs, that would mean that our ammunition would have to be used for all of this. And folks, we don't have it. Now, what happens? Answer me this, all those who are Lindsey Graham backers that want to do this, that want to give Israel everything. What happens if we get into a war? What happens if we give so many of our interceptor missiles and other rockets and artillery shells and whatever other kind of military support to Israel, to Ukraine, to Taiwan, which we continue to do, and now all of a sudden we need to fight? With what? Are you going to be content on that day to say, well, yeah, but we gave Israel everything they asked for, and now we don't have enough to fight our own battles? And now somebody like Russia, who has these huge stockpiles of ammunition, and China, who has even bigger, and especially of the categories of things that matter the most, of anti-ship missiles, anti-air missiles, we won't have the air defense to stop it. You've already seen, we've talked about it several times. The NATO officials have admitted that as recently as May of this past year, we had 5% of the interceptor missiles, the air defense missiles that we need for our flank security of NATO. And that was months ago. And how many of those have we given to Ukraine? You heard Jake Sullivan 2 or 3 weeks ago say that we've given everything that we have from all over the world to Ukraine, and it's not enough for there either. Why do you think it would be enough for us? We don't have the capacity to make those things in large numbers fast enough. So you are literally putting our national security at risk by doing this. And I just don't know how long that's going to continue to fly there. And I don't know why that's, I guess the reason why we keep doing that is because we just want to pretend like it'll never happen. Well, we're not going to get into a war with anybody. And if they do, they'll be afraid of us anyway, because we've got nuclear weapons and we'll have a trump card in there. Yeah. You want to put that to the test? Do you really want to bank your survival on the hope that Vladimir Putin is bluffing? Even though he wasn't bluffing when he went to war, even though he wasn't bluffing when he annexed these 4 territories, even though he wasn't bluffing when he annexed Crimea? Do you really want to do that? Because I don't. I actually believe that Putin, and if it came down to it, would use tactical nuclear weapons if he felt his security was threatened. And so we may get into a conventional war that we don't have enough ammunition for it, and then get drawn into a nuclear war, or be faced with the prospect of surrender and just being defeated, but at least living to fight another day, and to live to fight, to come back and try to rebuild our defensive systems. Why should we get into a situation like that? Why should we even, have a possibility of getting into there? I don't see any value in doing that at all, but that's what these people are putting on your shoulders. You are being used as, bait's probably not the right word, cannon fodder maybe, because the likes of Lindsey Graham, Jack Keane, John Bolton, all these folks, Eli Lake, now add him to that list. All these people who keep saying that we should just give Israel everything they want are jeopardizing your national security. And they're unconcerned about it because they just, it'll never happen. So they're not going to worry about it. Well, you better worry about it. I do worry about it because I see this very clearly. And now I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what is going to happen. And it's possible that you could take that gamble, just like it's possible you could go to Vegas and not have any idea what you want to do and put down something on a certain number of a roulette table, and it might actually land on it. So it's possible. It's possible that they could get by with this because maybe we'll be able to avoid getting sucked into a war. But if they're wrong, they're not just wrong for themselves. They're wrong for you. They're wrong for some of my brothers who are still in the uniform. Actually, everybody who's in uniform is, in a sense, my brother, in my sense. But the armed forces, your sons, your daughters, your brothers, your sisters.
As you're aware,
all right, we're going to
conducted a significant attack against Israel today, launching approximately 200 ballistic missiles targeting several locations in Israel. We condemn these reckless attacks by Iran, and we call on Iran to halt any further attacks, including from its proxy forces. During the attack, the U.S. military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. U.S. Navy destroyers deployed to the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles. Initial reports indicate that Israel was able to intercept the majority of incoming missiles and that there was minimal damage on the ground, but I'd refer you to Israel for confirmation and any questions on that as they're in a better position to discuss. Please note that we're still assessing the attack and the outcome, so numbers may change as we receive updates. Additionally, no U.S. personnel were injured or harmed during the Iranian missile attack. Secretary Austin, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown Jr., and U.S. Central Command Commander General Eric Kurilla have been in constant contact with President Biden and Vice President Harris throughout the day to consult on the situation and U.S. actions. In addition to his phone call earlier this morning with Israeli Minister of Defense Gallant prior to the Iranian attack, Secretary Austin spoke to the minister again just a short while ago to get an update. He reaffirmed the United States' ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel and underscored that the U.S. remains well-postured throughout the Middle East region to protect U.S. forces and defend Israel in the face of threats from Iran and Iran-backed terrorist organizations. We'll provide a readout of that call as soon as possible. To be crystal clear, as Secretary Austin has said, should Iran, its partners, or its proxies use this moment to target American personnel or interests in the region, the United States will take every necessary measure to defend our people. And separately, I do have an update to provide on DoD support to Hurricane Helene response efforts, but I'll provide that at the end. With that, happy to take your questions. We'll start with AP. Tara.
Thanks, General Ryder. What Navy destroyers were involved in helping shoot down and intercept? And given this escalation, what's being communicated between Secretary Austin and Minister Gallant right now in terms of tampering things down and potentially avoiding a wider war?
So the two Navy destroyers involved were the USS Bulkley and the USS Cole. In terms of the conversations between Secretary Austin and Minister Gallant, I won't get into the private discussions other than to say we are consulting closely with them on next steps and the continued defense of Israel.
And then, are there any plans underway to conduct a NEO given the increased risk of a wider war?
Right now, there has been no order to evacuate. As you've heard us say before, we are a planning organization, so we, of course, plan for all contingencies. But as of right now, State Department has not called for an evacuation. Jennifer.
Should we assume that the SM-3s were used by the Cole and the Bulkley to shoot down or to intercept the missiles?
I'm not going to get into the specific type of ordnance, Jennifer, other than to say, again, they fired a dozen interceptors.
And Iran said that they gave a heads up to the U.S. and to Russia. How much warning were you given by Iran?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any pre-warning by Iran about their potential attack. As you know, this is something we've been following very closely for a while, based on the threats of retaliation by Iran. And so we've been closely consulting with Israel for a while now to be prepared in the eventuality. And as today demonstrated, we were prepared and we were able to successfully work alongside Israel to defend them from this attack. Let me go to Carla.
Thanks, Pat. You said that the destroyers shot down Iranian missiles. Where do they come from? Were they all from inside Iran, or was some also from Yemen being shot by the Houthis?
Carla, to my knowledge, and again, we're still assessing this, these were all launched from Iran, ballistic missiles. And what I said was that they fired the interceptors towards those missiles. So,
and then were any other U.S. assets involved in this defense?
Of course, we have a lot of capability in the region, a lot of things that are there to be prepared for a wide variety of threats. But in terms of the launching of these interceptors, it was those two destroyers.
So just being clear, no ground-based interceptors were used in this.
Correct.
Were the were you aware of any duds that didn't fire off, that maybe Iran wanted to fire more than the roughly 200?
As I mentioned, we're still assessing the outcome of the attack, and so we'll have much more information later. But these are all, our initial reports.
And then on the second call with the Secretary and Minister Gallant, did he urge Israel not to respond or to moderate any response to Iran, or did Gallant share any of Israeli intentions for their potential response here?
Well, again, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm just not going to be able to get into the details of their call, other than to say, again, we're consulting closely about next steps and the continued defense of Israel.
What does Secretary Austin think about the potential for an Israeli response here? Would he urge them, without saying what he said in the call necessarily, but what are his feelings about the potential? Would he urge them restraint or?
Well, look, if you take a step back here, we fully support Israel's right to defend itself. You just saw a very significant ballistic missile attack by Iran against Israel. And so, we'll continue to work alongside them to support their defense. We, of course, do not want to see a wider regional conflict. You've heard us say that many times, and we'll continue to work towards that end. But we also fully understand the fact that this was a significant attack by Iran. And so we're going to continue to consult closely, and we're going to continue to support their defense. Let me go to Laura.
Thank you. Just a couple of clarifications. Do you say that the U.S. destroyers had intercepted or shot down the missiles, or just that they fired?
I said that they fired approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles.
And were there any U.S. aircraft that shot interceptors at Iranian missiles?
What I've read out is what participated in the defense of Israel. Okay.
And then, sorry, just one more. Can you say if there were any drones or cruise missiles that were involved in the
Again, still assessing it right now. It appears it was ballistic missiles, no drones, but again, we'll continue to assess. Let me go to Joseph and then we'll come here.
Thank you. Just wanted to turn to the Israeli invasion in Lebanon. For the past couple of months, the department and the secretary have called for de-escalation. You guys have voiced your opposition to any ground incursion, invasions, limited operations. After we found out that the Israeli strike last week killed the Hezbollah chief, Hassan Nasrallah, it seems like the tone changed. From the statements last night, the department and the secretary said they supported what Israel is doing. So what changed for a change in that tone and that stance from the department?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Joseph, is we fully support Israel's right to defend itself against Hezbollah. As we understand it, they will be conducting limited operations to destroy Hezbollah infrastructure that's arrayed along the border there that could be used to threaten Israeli citizens. And so we're continuing to consult with the Israelis to better understand how they intend to go forward. Obviously, I'd refer you to them to talk or ask questions about details regarding those operations. But we fully understand as part of their overall efforts to return people home that they do need to address those threats that are along the border there. And so all that to say, we will continue to consult with the Israelis and other partners in the region long term about how we can ultimately de-escalate those tensions and get to a ceasefire.
Have they asked for any help from you guys doing whatever it is that they want to do?
No. Yes, sir.
Were the United States surprised by the scale of the Iranian attack on Israel?
Well, look, like I said before, we've been monitoring this for a while. Iran had been very public about its threats to retaliate. And so it's something that we've been monitoring. Certainly, this was a significant attack, probably about twice the size in terms of scope of what we saw earlier. But again, we're still assessing the outcomes of this. And as I highlighted at the top, we certainly condemn this reckless attack, this direct attack against Israel, and we'll continue to support Israel's defense.
Several Israeli media spoke about a response tonight, Israeli response tonight to this attack, including some, not just Iran, some other Middle Eastern countries. Will the United States be assisting the Israelis in their response?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about hypotheticals. I'd refer you to the Israelis to talk about,
I'm asking about, will the Americans help them with their
Well, what you're asking me is if they're going to do something. And what I'm saying is I'm not going to speculate about what or if they may do. As I highlighted to several of your colleagues, we're consulting closely with the Israelis in terms of next steps, with the emphasis being the defense of Israel. So let me go this side of the room. Oren.
Essentially a follow-up to that question, is the U.S. willing to strike Iran in response to this? Are you putting that on or off the table?
Well, look, Garnett, again, I don't want to get into hypotheticals. I think I was very clear at the top that should U.S. forces be targeted by Iran or its proxies, we'll take necessary steps to defend our people. And I think we've also been very clear that we're going to support the defense of Israel. And so I'm not going to get into theoretical or speculative operations at this stage, other than to say, we mean what we say and we say what we mean.
And then a follow-up question. Iran claims to have used a new Fatah missile, which is supposed to be a hypersonic ballistic missile. Can you assess whether they did use new and advanced weaponry in this attack and whether they learned from the April attack?
Again, we're still assessing the attack and the outcomes. And so, we may have more to provide later, but I don't have anything.
Gary, let's go ahead and pull out of there. I think they're kind of getting into some of the
two
more
questions,
nitpicky
please.
questions now. We didn't hear one of the things that I was hoping we wouldn't, and that is that they're not announcing any more troop deployments into the area, so they're not building up our forces. But a couple of things that are less reassuring is that he was again asked that question a couple of times right there before they pulled out. If Israel responds, and apparently some reports are coming out that Israel may respond tonight. They may not even wait until the sun has come up. But he said, if they do, would America join in with them, i.e. striking directly against Iran? And he gave a very vague answer, which is ironic because he claimed we mean what we say and we say what we mean, but then he didn't actually say what he means. So we don't really know, because he said, if the U.S. is directly attacked, then yes, we will respond. But then he was kind of unclear and implied that we would, because he said, but we will continue to support Israel defending itself. Now, you can certainly interpret that to mean, yeah, we'll use some of our missiles to actually join with you in responding. So that door is still wide open. We don't know. So he's very unclear about what he would do, but he implied that we might. So we'll see how that works out. The other thing of a couple of things of interest is that he said there were over 200 ballistic missiles fired. That matches one of the reports that we had seen. It was quite a sizable number, whatever it was. And quite a few got through. And of course, he reiterated what Blinken and the first Jake Sullivan, I think it said that the rounds were defeated and it was ineffective, etc. Except that we saw a bunch of stuff blowing up. So we don't know if that's just Israel not reporting what actually happened, or if maybe Iran targeted just stuff out in the middle of nowhere to show that we can get through your defense system, and if we want to target something, we'll hit it. Potentially for future responses. That remains to be seen. We don't have enough information to be able to answer that. The other interesting thing was he said that the United States did participate in this, and we did fire at least a dozen interceptor missiles from two of our ships, the USS Cole, and I didn't catch the name of the other warship, but that we actually participated in shooting down, again, some of these incoming ballistic missiles. But the troubling thing is, he said, Austin, in a conversation with Defense Minister Gallant, said again, we repeat our ironclad commitment to Israel defense. So at least so far, and this really can't be a surprise, even though I don't like it, we're going to continue doing whatever Israel wants. At least that's the stand so far, and we keep saying that publicly. Now, I guess it really depends on what happens next, because if Israel takes some kind of serious provocative reaction and hits something important, and one of the things I'm really going to be watching for, and I think is the biggest risk, is if Israel goes after Iran's nuclear facilities, because that's one of the things that a lot of Israeli commentators and other officials have hinted at for a long time, that they would take that out, and they want to use this. Netanyahu in his UN speech actually talked a lot about their UN nuclear weapons program and how we have to stop it, etc. So one thinks that there's probably a good chance, and I'd say more than a 50% chance, that when Israel says they're going to respond, that's going to be their target. And that remains to be seen. If they strike something tonight, then of course that's existing target list they've already had. So we'll certainly be monitoring that. That'll be good enough for right now. That's the main issues here. We just want to bring you this breaking news, and we're going to keep you up on top of it. And one of the reasons why we love to have this show and why we chose to have this particular episode is I don't want any of these public statements to be passed along that don't pass the common sense test, and that we leave unaddressed the reality. These ridiculous statements that sometimes don't ever get challenged, and some people may not even know. But we want to make sure that you know what's underneath some of these and what the ramifications and potential consequences are for the United States if we don't somehow grow a backbone in the White House. That may be hoping against hope because of many things, not the least of which is the upcoming presidential election. But like all this other stuff, we're going to continue to call things the way they are. We're going to tell you the truth because we're unintimidated and uncompromised on making sure that you know what's really going on. If there's any further developments, if Israel fires back, or if there's any new strikes by Iran, you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to bring you the latest. In the meantime, thank you for watching today, and we're going to have Doug McGregor on tomorrow, and I have a lot of confidence that he'll have some interesting things to say about this very subject. So we'll see you tomorrow, and be sure and like and subscribe on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.